No, I'm sober. So yeah, exploring gender through LARP. I'm Alex Rowland. I'm moderating this panel, so I'm going to be quiet-ish. And let's meet our new friends up here.
All right. Well, I'm Kim Sward. My pronouns are they, them, or am. In a professional context, I'll take she because world. I'm involved with Intercon, the Neil community, and the Accelerant Bachar communities located in the greater New England area.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie Gordon. My pronouns are she and her. I am also involved in the Intercon community and the sort of Bachar LARPing New England community. I also just had laser eye surgery yesterday, which is why I'm wearing these crazy sunglasses, and I'm going to be putting in eye drops throughout the talk. Sorry about that, but that's why.
Don't let Katie fool you. It's just because she's super rad. And I'm Ashleigh Porta. My pronouns are she, her. I'm involved in a smattering of LARP communities at this point. The list has gotten long recently. I sort of started out meeting these people through Boffer LARP, have since gotten away from that and more into Intercon and in the Nordic scene, going Gnumbook, that kind of thing.
So I had originally prepared some questions for this, and just we got a pretty intimate turnout, we'll call it that. And so I'm thinking this could be more of a forum. Right. So first off, I want to be is there anything that our wonderful panelists specifically wanted to address? Because that's good. I'm going to prioritize that, and then maybe hear from the audience and see if they had any specific interests that they wanted to address during this. How does that sound?
Sure, sounds good.
Great.
So I'm non-binary, and there aren't often enough non-binary characters in LARP. It's important to include them, particularly in positive lights. So, for example, if you're going to do world backgrounds or give information, think about maybe using a different gender than just cisgender folks. Maybe include other pronouns. There are non-binary people who do use the cis pronouns, or the more traditionally cis pronouns, I should say. But it's important because representation matters, and it tells people that they're welcome.
So I am, I would say, I guess, transmasculine is the term I'm using right now. I've been LARPing for the last many years, and playing different characters and experiencing other people playing different characters has really helped me get that figured out. So I feel like I'm still, I'm sure many of us are, but I'm still figuring it out, still on the journey of it, but I think LARP has been a really excellent tool in doing that, so I'm excited to talk about that and ways that can be a good tool for people.
For me, two topics. One, the potential of LARP as a something that can break you out of your existing gender feelings and help you realize things about yourself. And also the exploration of gender as a designer, because I've recently been getting more into writing games myself, and I'm finding myself, exploring my own gender and that of people I know and trust through the designs I'm working on. So those are things I want to talk about.
Good. So question for the whole group. Did LARP make you gay?
No, it started that way.
Oh.
That's what I'm hearing.
The more serious answer is LARP didn't make me gay, but LARP did kind of make me trans. I realized my need to transition fully when I played a female character in a LARP kind of by accident. And then I was accidentally cast in a female role, and the people writing it were like, "Oh, no, we'll change it to a male role for you." And I said, "No, you won't." After going through 4 hours of people using she, her for me, I could never go back again, basically. So yeah, LARPing didn't make me gay. I was gay before that, but LARPing made me trans.
Yeah. I think LARP lets you realize things about yourself that you're not aware of, or you've been hiding a lot from yourself. I look back at all of the characters I used to design for myself, and they were always stuck between two worlds. always trying to explain things to each other's side. Oh wait, my gender. Oh, that makes sense now. And like I knew that I kept doing this, and I couldn't figure out why I was doing it. And then one day I had a wait. Maybe I'm no. Oh, I see. Oh, I'm gonna go think for a while.
I guess, yeah, similarly, I was very, very excited about places where I could wear fake facial hair and have people go, cool. That was really nice.
See, I weirdly had the different reaction where anytime they tried to supposedly cast me as a male, I was assigned female at birth, or AFAB, but I would freak out. I would worry about it, and I would have these moments of existential crisis about, I can barely female. I barely pass as a girl. You want me to go play a boy? Oh my, how do you do that? I'm allowed to do that? Mm-hmm. So.
I couldn't tell you how, honestly.
I had a similar experience early in my figuring out process. I was cast as a trans man, actually, in a LARP, and I just panicked. I was like, I can't, and I couldn't really explain why this made me so terrified. And I went and played it and sort of didn't talk about it at all. It was sort of a LARP about different identities and experiences, and I feel like I really actually didn't let myself get into the role. Mm-hmm. And sort of later was like, oh, maybe it's because I was afraid I'd like it too much, I guess.
Yeah.
To bounce off of that, that's definitely a thing, right? Where you're like, you go into it and you're afraid of what it's going to mean for you going forward, kind of afraid of the change that such an experience might bring. Mm-hmm. And, I guess one message that maybe all of us can get behind is don't be scared. Just let it, just go with it and see what happens. At the end of the day, the LARP will end, and, you might have some bleed out from it that you have to deal with, but the LARP will end, and the experience will end. Yeah. So go for it,
It's only a few hours, most likely. You can always say no and leave midway through if it gets to be too much.
Exactly.
And that's important to, if you need to put boundaries around something like that, put them there to try it and see what it does. I've seen Katie actually in one of the LARPs that she's currently in, where she does wonderful mixed gender presentations with there's going to be a calendar of your character at some point. fake beard, chest hair, open shirt, laced up back boots, complete extremes of gender, and it's fabulous.
What I was trying to do with that character was. I feel like a lot of times androgynous is just presented as sort of this neither gender. Like if you're androgynous, you must be sort of, I guess, elfy looking and not have any characteristics. And instead, I was like, how many characteristics can I jam onto myself? So that was fun.
I actually really love that.
Can I ask why a former presentation didn't jive with you?
The
David Bowie, if you will.
I think that part of what I'm excited about in real life is things like having chest hair or having a beard or things like that, and that doesn't really mesh with the Elvin David Bowie look. So I wanted, I think, an excuse to try out those things, but also say, hey, I also have boobs, check them out too, and play with it basically, and not just be like, I sort of have to hide all of my characteristics in order to go for a new presentation. Instead, I can accentuate them and also add other stuff and have fun with it. Yeah.
I find it interesting, just the idea of not having to hide something, when that is one of the transparency is such a thing in LARP, right? It's a principle that we are dealing with, and not having to hide something, and in fact putting it on display is kind of how you get good at LARP, right?
Yeah.
So I feel a kinship with that idea of putting things on display. Do you feel like there's anything unique about LARP that allows you to do that?
Yeah.
Start on that if you want.
Sure.
Yeah. So. How do I want to word it? LARP lets you enter into a state of play that is embodied, right? When we play, we do let ourselves wander off the beaten path, so we let ourselves experiment and grow. And LARP in particular is something we're doing physically with our bodies. And so that opens the door for that level of experimentation with our physical selves, where you're going to put something on display like that and put yourself out there because it's safer. Because at the end of the day, again, you could be like, oh, it was just a game, I was just playing, even if that play is really meaningful to you. That's my take on it.
Definitely, I agree that it really helps to have sort of an alibi of, oh, this is just
exactly.
my character.
Yeah.
Don't read anything into this. This is just my character.
Alibi is one of the best words for experimentation with gender.
It also breaks societal rules. So if the societal rules are the problem with what you're trying to look for or what you think you aren't allowed to do, it gives you permission within a context to try things. So I also didn't go for like the elven look, but that's mostly because nowadays I'm chubby. And it's very hard there is something about being a certain size.
Why aren't there chubby elves, by the way? I'm not into fantasy. I don't know the actual answer to that.
I think they get pushed into dwarfdom. Yeah.
Dwarves are always the best anyways.
Yeah. And I like dwarves. Dwarves can be sexy, of course. But, there's a thing where I am a bigger bodied person. And therefore trying to do the androgynous, the idea of the David Bowie does not work as well, in my mind anyway. And that's completely my own internal problem. That's me putting fat shaming on myself, quite frankly. But it's another role in presentation that's stopping me from sometimes doing that.
I really like this idea. I wish we had a word from what you're describing in terms of, it's like this, it's it's a lot of trans women, for instance, it's internalized misogyny, and trying to in terms of how I feel I need to look to feel good about it, but just for non-binary folk.
Oh, there's totally a thing about that.
I just want what's the word? Is there a word? Because I want to know it.
No, there should be, because there's totally this thing in non-binary spaces where people worry they're not trans enough too because they're not presenting right, and if you're worried that you're not trans enough. Yeah, you're trans. Stop worrying.
Yeah, I've heard that people questioning whether or not they're trans.
Yeah.
I'm that's a pretty good indicator.
You mean imposter syndrome?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also part of the erasure portion of things. There's a lot of corollaries between bisexuals and non-binaries being erased for the exact same reasons because they're not one extreme or the other. So. That's a little off the topic of LARP, but at the same time.
On the topic of gender.
Yeah, on the topic of gender.
I was going to say, what's everything like that?
Piggybacking on that, something I see very much in the elven David Bowie is...
Great paradigm name now.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Almost asexuality of it, because there's no groups, but there's also not other sex organs.
It's not David Bowie from Labyrinth.
It's not Labyrinth David Bowie. It's Aladdin David Bowie.
Yeah.
And so that sense that if you exist in this liminal space, you can't be sexy.
Yeah, you can't be sexual if you are not clearly in one or the other, and it's a bad stereotype, but it kind of goes hand in hand.
And I guess my question is as trans/NB folks, how has playing romance in a game helped you come into yourself?
That's a good question.
I don't think we were ready to answer a question like that. Are you sure?
Yeah. I don't know. I default when I wasn't aware of what was going on with me. I defaulted to swashbuckling, fencer types. I always play a swashbuckling rogue. That's the best type. There is no other type. No, why would you do anything else? So, yeah, I think its flair is how it actually came across, and I would often take more of the traditionally masculine sort of role in any sort of relationship type thing in a LARP. I pursued people more than not, so I think I switched gender paradigms a lot. I can think about that for a while though.
I think I really enjoy playing romance plot and LARPs. I haven't had a lot of experiences that have been outside of the gender binary as the character, though. I've played a woman who is being courted by a man or is in relationship with a man, and I've played a man who's courting a woman or in relationship with a woman. I've had a couple of experiences of games where the whole structure of gender was different in that game. but I don't think I had a sort of romance plot in them. Usually, when I'm playing a man, I tend to be very stressed that I'm not doing it right. So it takes a little while to get over that, but it certainly helps if the other people in the game or the person who's playing my partner also seems sort of like queer, I guess. Then I'm less worried they're going to be looking at me like, what is this?
Yeah, there's a permission there if someone else understands on any level of that spectrum, actually. I also have a really personal frustration where when I'm playing in a LARP, people always seem to assume that my characters are cis. And they assume that they're female, and they don't bother asking me my pronouns. And I'm like, but why wouldn't they be my default? Like, why are you assuming that my default roleplay is going to be a gender I'm not? I don't assume that about you. Why are you doing that?
I think that touches on sort of a game design thing of having pronouns on name badges and stuff like that.
If you're even playing in a game that has name badges, sure. But many don't. The buffer games we all play don't.
Some of them have buttons and ribbons, though.
But it's like a newer development.
Yeah, that's true.
I never actually answered the question about the romance thing, but actually I don't know that I have a good solid feeling on this one, because it doesn't what happens with me is I get cast in female roles in LARPs, which is what I want, and I tend to interact with romance plots however my character would interact with them, and the whole time I'm treated like a woman, again, what I want, and it's just all very affirming, I guess is what I'm saying. And that's a thing that can be true of it, is that like you can have these really affirming experiences where you put on the gender you want to perform, and then it all goes well, and it's just like, oh, that felt really nice. And that's the thing you can get too, is you can get euphoria rather than just the alleviation of dysphoria, which is something that I chase generally in my gender experimentation.
So
I'm not after necessarily the alleviation of dysphoria, though that's also good, but I'm after like the good feeling that comes of, oh, this feels right,
So I have a question for you myself, actually, because
go on.
You're breaking the rules, I know. But so when you design a character,
Sure.
Is your character normally someone who's trans, or are they someone who is assigned female at birth, or do you think about that?
I do think about it, and it's really, a lot of it goes into what I want to explore with that character. So for example, at Just a Little Lemon, I made the explicit decision that my character was cis, because there I didn't want to touch on the trans feminine experience, because that would like heavily tie into like the drag scene and stuff that I didn't feel comfortable really speaking to or getting into. Yeah, right. Like that's a different culture from my 2018 transness, and I wasn't gonna. No, that's not me. With other characters that I've played, yes, they are explicitly trans, because I want to include that in, for example, with one character I made recently, I made her transgender because I wanted to bring that into the game world explicitly and make that a part of the world by living it as the character. And so like it really just depends on, I guess, what game I'm at and where I want to take it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I had realized that I had my own blinders on about that at one point when another trans woman mentioned that her character in game was trans, and I just had never thought about it one way or the other, and I'm like, oh wow, I was head blind about that. It just hadn't crossed my mind. So, yeah.
Yeah, and when I'm doing it, I do, and I don't know whether or not this is like the right way to go about it, but I guess I push my transness a little more. Like I like don't wear a scarf because I have enough of a larynx that it shows, and like stuff like that. I just sort of like I don't throw it in everyone's face, but I do like just, it's that same thing of like embodying these characteristics you want to show off. They sort of like put the things about me that are, you know, a function of like having had a testosterone fueled first puberty forward. I've talked a lot, I'm sorry.
Don't apologize.
Just on the subject of character creation, that made me think of one of the steps that I had that was sort of a eureka moment was when I was trying to make a character for a campaign game, and I was thinking, okay, I want them to have this characteristic, you know, I want them to have these problems and these thoughts and stuff, but can I just not filter female over that for once? Like, can I just be a person who has these issues and not have to add female to that? And at the time that I was like, okay, well then I'll try playing a male character, because that's of course the other option in my head at the time. And it was sort of later that I was like, wait, maybe most women don't actually think of female as a thing they kind of have to add on to their presentation. Maybe it's just sort of there to start with.
I do that too. So yeah.
But character design, I feel like, is a very helps figure out where you're starting from, because you're thinking about what to put onto it, I guess, in my experience.
Any other questions?
What can GMs do to support people's gender exploration in life?
Good question.
Yeah, that is a good question.
My first instinct is creating a culture of yes and, because that will frame it in terms that the old clueless cis person will get. Because if you're already in a culture of, yeah, I'm going to go with what people are doing, then, you know, maybe people are more likely to just like, oh, okay, yeah, and not like question it or be jerks about it. But that's sort of my, like, off the top of my head instinct.
I like the idea of actually having pronoun ribbons or badges in game, because it reinforces normalcy around that. It's also definitely a thing where a lot of the people I know who have realized that they're trans realized it through actually LARPing. Like, so sometimes the person who is going to be trying to do that, who is actually, without meaning to be being offensive, because they're portraying things to a stream, is because they're trying to figure out their own things. And just have patience with people if they're doing that as well.
Yeah.
Because it's never intentional, you know?
Yeah. Well, sometimes it is.
Yeah, well.
I've run into the occasional, like, bad moment where it's like, I get what you're going for, but no. You know, there was a player in a game I was at once who was doing a, like purposeful, like, wearing a lot of drag, talking in a deep voice, playing it for laughs kind of thing. And that might have been gender exploration, but it was also like, I'm bleeding in my heart because of this. Can you not?
Yeah.
So it can go wrong.
Yeah. Fair.
When I've written games, usually I write all the characters as gender neutral and have the player decide. And that's sort of my instinctive, oh, of course, if we do this, then everything will be fine. But of course, there's not a particular easy answer. And I've had a lot of discussions with co-GMs and things about, well, sometimes, you know, you really want characters to have defined gender, because in a way that's, in some ways it's good, but in some ways it's just taking gender out of the story doesn't actually solve it and doesn't give people an avenue to explore different genders if you just say, oh, well, it's just whatever. So I guess I'm still thinking about that, like maybe try to have a mix of games available so that people can go to what they feel drawn to.
I'm sorry.
To respond to that is, I try to write like a mix, like have some characters where like, you know, their experience as a woman is relevant, but then have like most of the rest of the game being characters that can go either way. And I've had good luck with that.
That sounds good,
Yeah, I think the problem with taking gender out of the game in that way is that you have a tendency then to basically take gender out of racist people that are, you know, not in the perceived majority, you know, and that's a problem too, because it winds up being erasure if you're not careful. Like it's hard.
I have a question, but I want to prioritize sort of like the forum's participation. So if anyone has anything, no?
Yeah, I have a question.
Oh, hey, sorry.
Yeah. So
yeah, Scout, hit me.
This is very similar, and it's sort of mostly around non-binariness. One of the things that I'm trying to do is, for Dr. Scola, I want to write a plot that's explicitly to explore what it's like to be non-binary, but I'm worried about doing that in a way that tokenizes it. So, sort of, what are your thoughts around that, and how would you go about writing something to like explore it without putting definitions on what it has to be?
So that's a really interesting question. Definitely. So I would make sure that you have more than one non-binary person look at whatever you're doing, because that's always a good screen, because there are different perspectives on this as well. You're going to get a different perspective from someone who has very clearly, fixed gender, I'm somewhere between male and female, to someone who's more gender fluid, to someone who is agender or outside the gender spectrum. Yeah?
I would even add to that, people from different regions.
Yes, absolutely.
Because the culture of non-binariness here on the East Coast is completely different from how we talk about non-binary identities on the West Coast. And that's even just within our own country.
Yeah, that's totally a thing.
I would, if you don't mind, I would like to center that for a second. Could you mind explicating for the room? That is interesting.
Yeah, can you please?
We were even just talking about this at lunch, where somebody was saying use they, them as the default. And in my communities on the West Coast, it's use a name as the default, because people still feel that they, them is gendering.
Yeah, whereas...
And that is a huge, that's really upsetting for a lot of agender people on the West Coast, where they, them is the gender.
Whereas, more locally, at least in those social groups that I'm in, they is seen as not gendered at all because it's not on that spectrum. And so we were talking about this, and it was like, well, no, I don't think of that as meaning someone in between male and female. I mean someone who's just outside the binary either way. But okay, I see what you're saying. It's not weird. It's a difference in how pronouns are used. It's similar, they is the default, but there are other pronouns out there, and maybe explore using some of those too. I think they has become a default because it's easy for people to adopt. It doesn't mean it's right for everybody.
Which one's better, do you think?
Can we fight?
Yeah, I was going to say, we need to enter them in the Thunder Dome.
I think we have a lot of time. This could be Queer Fight Club.
Oh, no. I should have said in the Gender Dome. Come on.
Oh! Yeah, that's much better.
Yeah, it's gross. Simmer down.
I just want to hear the music for that.
Puns? Who even are you?
I guess I'm not gay enough. Sorry.
Yeah,
So, well, thank you. I know you were about to move into something right before.
There was a question.
Oh, let's hear it.
Mine wasn't so much a question. I was just going to comment on that using names specifically is actually kind of useful in terms of it is something that people who are maybe not as familiar with the trans community can easily adopt. And that can be helpful.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I oscillated between using they them for people I'm not sure of and using their name specifically if I know it. So if I'm like that person over there, I'm like they them.
I've also had the experience where there was just a summer where every other month or every month people were coming out as trans and transitioning around me, and some of them had changed names and some of them hadn't, and for a while, until I could train my brain, I was using names because I wouldn't screw up a name, and I do not want to misgender someone, especially when they're in that brand new, shiny, telling people phase of things.
That'd be 2014 to 15, right?
Yeah, you're in that group, in fact.
I don't know what you're talking about.
What can your co-players do to support this?
So I would make sure to ask people you're playing with what you want them to do when someone misgenders you. Because some people have strong feelings about this in different directions, and so it's best to get consent around that. I would like you to just correct people and move on. That would be great. I don't want to always be the person telling someone they've misgendered me. That's really exhausting.
Yeah, to bounce off that a little bit.
Okay.
Huh?
Just because it's so relevant to what
Yeah.
you just said, I'm holding on. You're like a train of thought that's super important to express right now. I think this is like it's just so topical. We got to do it.
Okay.
They came up to me after the last panel that I was on and asked a really, really great question. And I would, if you don't mind, would you like to?
Yeah. So I recently started trying to introduce pronoun correction mechanics into one of my communities, and one of the things that was important to me was not having an easy way for me to correct, but it was having a specific response on the part of the person being corrected.
Oh, interesting.
Because of the number of times that I've gotten I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. I would never, and it's like they're looking for brownie points.
We actually were talking about doing a role play scenario about that in one of our other panels about how to properly apologize and how not to, because
Turned into like a corporate training.
yeah, well, it was also like, if you screw up, and by the way, we all screw up. I feel really dumb when I screw up other people's pronouns. Don't make it about you. Good Lord. Don't tell me you're such a good ally outside of this. Just apologize and move on. Oh.
Is there something that you settled on?
I haven't figured it out yet.
So there was
Thank you was great.
Yeah, I do like thank you.
Yeah, there was a game that someone else mentioned during lunch where they actually had like a monetary like cost in game when they screwed up someone's
pronoun
gender.
charge.
They had a pronoun charge, and other players could enforce it on the person who screwed up someone's pronouns.
When all else fails, crush them with capitalism.
And,
I actually hate that solution because capitalism is terrible. Moving on.
and I don't know how I feel about that, but they seem to like it because it gamified the actual correct behavior.
I mean, that's not bad. Gamification works a little bit. Like a little bit of extrinsic motivation will work for small tasks like that. So maybe that's not actually that bad. Just from a site standpoint.
Yeah.
I'm a teacher outside of Larp, so I think about this stuff. Anyway.
And we'll also say that one of the other things that we talked about at that panel was about not silencing the feelings that somebody has after being misgendered. And that's sort of the flip side of the pronoun correction. If you're putting stuff on how to do it, then you're erasing those feelings.
And that actually brings me right back around to what I was going to say before. Is that sometimes, yeah, you did it, good job. Is that sometimes I have the mental energy to correct somebody, or it's somebody I really don't like and they've done it a bunch of times, and I just want to give them hell, you know. Other times I'm really drained and I can't do it anymore. And so if someone misgenders me, I just want cis people collect your own. I'm tired.
Come get your boy.
And you know, I feel like there needs to be room for all these different modes of feeling about that. There needs to be room for the things you feel when people screw up.
So a friend of mine brought up the idea of like health meters, where when you're really high on your health meter of misgendering, you know, you can take more of it, but when you're down low, sometimes it'll just make you snap.
I'm never high on that health
Yeah.
No, I mean Tracer, squishy DPS, I got nothing.
Yeah. And how big that is for one person is different all the time, so. Yeah.
Did we successfully inspire you?
I think it's just time at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I know that we've seen in some of our communities that even just talking about these issues help. We ran something at Nelco last year where I was on a panel talking about different types of gender and gender presentation in LARPs, and I was really surprised that some of the older white cis men who I never thought were going to show up in this panel to hear about it showed up, wanted to learn how not to offend people. And if you had told me that 5 years earlier, I would have been shocked. But it's incremental change, and so sometimes the people who you think are never going to change or get it will get it. It's a lot of education points.
How do you walk the line between setting boundaries and doing what is good for yourself, right? Good your own mental health, and also like not having to perform emotional labor for the sisses constantly.
I do that badly. That's my answer.
It's perfectly reasonable, but do better. Take care of your you. How do you walk that line? That's a really tough question. I think a lot
I'm
of
asking
that,
for me.
Oh, for you.
Fair.
I mean, I think a lot of that has to do with sort of like what your personality and your strengths are like. Like for me, I often have the energy to do that labor because I want people to do the right thing and I want them to learn. Because like I said, I'm a teacher. I want people to know things because when they get it, I get that burst of they got it, yes, and it's nice for me. For somebody else, if like that's not something you personally get energy back from, keep your energy and let other folks collect this person who's screwing up. I think it really a lot of it depends on your personal outlook.
So actually, piggybacking off of that, one of the reasons I do talk about this sort of stuff is exactly that. Because I think talking about things, especially things that people are uncomfortable about, gives people permission to both learn about them, gives them some permission to screw up within limits, and it also gives them permission to try new things. Mm-hmm. So,
since I still use the pronouns that I was given, I don't have that happen very much in my regular life. In LARPs, certainly people have, if I'm playing a male character, people have said she, and usually they just sort of briefly kick themselves and then move on, which I'm mostly okay with. I think one way I've sort of, the character that Kim was talking about before, that's sort of very out there as far as most people are concerned, is sort of trying to kind of ride that uncomfortableness, I guess. That character will accept any pronouns, but part of my meta goal is to make you never really sure which ones to use, and sort of become okay with that, I guess.
I quipped earlier that you're wearing the sunglasses because you're totally rad, but that's actually totally rad.
Yeah.
So I think that, at least, I think with the other players in that game, I think that sort of helps both say, yes, you're not always sure, but no, that doesn't need to be a terrifying thought. So just sort of roll with it.
Yeah, it's very cool. Thanks. Yeah. I mean, I think also, like, when I'm in a game environment in particular, I get more pissed off when I hear people misgendering other people.
Oh, yeah.
Than I do about myself.
No, that's actually, I feel that way in real life, too.
Yeah, I encounter it more in games.
Yeah, true. Yeah. You see it a lot with, like, NPCs, right? Oh, here's a tip, going back, like, 10 minutes to the question about GMs, or how to, like, make things better as a co-player at a GM. NPCs who are often like, they're playing like Goblin number 3 or a Fire Elemental or something, don't gender them. Just don't. Like I can go through a whole Boffer game as like staff side, and when I'm out playing a face character, I'm gendered correctly the whole time. As even though it's still me, and these are still my friends who know who I am. I go out in blacks and a couple swords and a tabard, and suddenly it's all he, and it's like, what the hell?
Well, it also happens with like monsters. Yeah, why does that moving tree have a gender?
Yeah, exactly.
I think I mean.
Sorry, I kind of tangented a little, but
sure. No, I think it's sort of a problem. It speaks to a larger problem of anything we're fighting and killing is probably male.
Yeah,
that's what I've seen in most, because
it's not though.
It's not.
My
it's
whole
just that's
first
the
year and a half of LARPing was as an NPC, and it was constantly she, no matter what gender I was even presenting at that point.
Mm-hmm. I have a non-binary friend that happens to all the time. They're AFAB, and if they go out as a crunchy, they've gone out as a bird and have been turned into a female bird when they've been fighting people.
Yeah. It makes no sense. Like, why? Mm-hmm. And so you ask about creating culture to fight that, and I think that's one thing you can include in-game culture, especially in like these campaign style walker games, but also just generally like this is. I haven't been to Magiscola, but I know Magiscola has NPCs. Maybe it's applicable there. It's just like creating a culture of not gendering characters you aren't sure of the gender of, like you would do with people.
But that also goes back to the difference in how non-binary pronouns are used, where before you were saying they is gendered, and it's not here. So maybe to have the discussion about how to gender people as well. When you're saying don't gender things or people or whatever, come to some sort of conclusion as a community on how you're going to not do that.
Also, I want to jump in again. So I recently read an article also on how there are so few non-binary human characters.
Yeah, I love that article. Yeah.
And I just wanted to also bring that up of like, also make sure that if you're not gendering your monsters, also have some non-gendered humans.
Yeah.
I haven't read that article. That sounds awesome.
Yeah,
it sounds rad.
Posted it on their Facebook page.
It's about like how most non-binary people in like media are like angels or centaurs or robots or aliens or other.
Fairies is a big one.
Yeah.
I'm processing that. Yeah.
And we have a standard Terran race in our sci-fi game, and like because we have so many really colorful alien, robot, and like weird thing races, all of the people have kind of like most of our trans players play aliens that are not binary gender to begin with. So all of our humans are binary. Like I wish I could fix this, but I'm not going to tell people what to play.
You could. Are you staff for that game?
Yes.
You could fix it by having non-binary NPC characters, non-binary face characters. Well, that helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like if the trans folks are like, no, I want to play an alien, like giving them tentacles, like
And I mean, even just the sense. Been thinking a little bit about like Left Hand of Darkness recently, which is imperfect in many ways, but the sense that like as a character learns more about themselves, as a base character learns more about themselves, that they can change that. And that is just a thing that happens. Like maybe they start with one side.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, hell yes. There's a thing. Do in character transitions and in character gender questioning as plot lines. Hell yeah.
I've seen people do transitions for characters after the person's transitioned in real life, which has been very cool. But doing it as exploration would be amazing.
Or doing it as a plot line for a character who starts questioning that, and like if it's a fantasy game, maybe that has some sort of magical ramifications or something. I don't know, but like. But maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's just part of their journey, and that's like season 3 B plot for this one NPC who's been a dude this whole time. Well, now they're non-binary. Now they're questioning that.
And even that sense of it doesn't necessarily have to be a plot where it's like one time they're just like, yeah, I go by she hers now.
Yeah.
Go.
Totally.
Also, in the realm of like trans fantasy characters, there's a book called The Fifth Season. And one of the characters is like taking a potion, which is like fantasy-y. Even as
Go on.
Is in like, but like the main character is like, I see her like run to the woods every morning to shave her face, and I like don't want to bring that up. It's very fascinating. So The Fifth Season, I would highly recommend it.
Yeah, I was actually just gonna ask, like, I was thinking about, I mean, on the beginning Larp, are like ways to experiment with gender, like other than picking, maybe if you don't pick this role or something. So are there any other ideas?
Play with your costuming too.
Yeah.
Like play with presentation. If you're not sure about the gender aspect, you can always play with things that are, traditionally one gender, which is kind of bullshit, but it's a real thing.
Yeah, in as much as gender is bullshit, gender is also something we sort of like are inflicted with because of culture, and so like if you've got you can probably identify some things that are outside your normal presentation. Try them on. See how you feel. Maybe you'll surprise yourself.
Yes, I have a comment that leads into a question. So I was noticing in my own community that we have a ridiculous amount of non-binary players and no non-binary characters. Like those players all choose to play cis binary characters because they felt like that was the culture that they had to play into. So at some point, I decided, you know what, I'm going to fix this, and I created a character in our super high fantasy game out on the West Coast that refused to talk to anyone that did not give them pronouns first. Like, I will not acknowledge your existence until you introduce yourself with your name and your pronouns. And it was actually really fascinating to see who just didn't even try to interact with me at that point. And to see how quickly other non-binary people got in on this. And we're like, oh yes, I'm so here for this. I'm going to also stop talking to people that I'm here for this. It's amazing.
It's almost like that's potentially indicative of who they are as people.
So then that kind of leads into the question of, have you ever done a gender exploration character for the sake of the community and not necessarily for yourself?
Ooh.
I honestly haven't, but maybe I should.
Yeah, I might want to. I haven't, but I had so much fear about that for a while that was one of the things holding me back. And I really like the fact that your impact was like a small cultural change that spread, and that's really powerful. I love that.
That's like a fairly unique heuristic I have not heard of before.
Yeah.
Cool.
I like it.
I have to process that.
Yeah. Like, we've also done locally a bunch of non-binary trans meetups just to give safe space to discuss things. And I think most of us all know who each other are in our local communities. It's just the sort of way it is.
We have this "we all know each other" joke, which is actually completely serious.
Very real.
Yeah, it's a small world.
Yeah.
There are actually only like 50 people total on the planet.
And they're all queer.
And they're all queer, yeah.
Yeah.
It's real nice, honestly. It's very safe.
It's comforting.
Yeah.
We were at the end of Intercon, and I was sitting around a table, and I looked around, and I suddenly realized every single person I was with was not cis, and it was lovely. It was like we were just chatting about things and talking about stuff, and it was so safe feeling. But I hadn't realized I had felt unsafe until I was in that environment. You know, in a way, you know?
Definitely.
Gotta have one to talk shit about, though.
All right, yeah.
I would like to comment on that thing too. Your question, because I've been sitting here trying to process this stuff. And I would say that, so experimenting with gender doesn't have to be specifically about I am now this thing. I'm a gender fluid. A character is gender fluid. But thinking about aspects of characters that are gendered, in terms of personality, costume is a good point. But aspects of personality that are gendered, really do some deconstruction there and decide maybe I could take this thing in a different direction. Because everything we do is has a gender placed upon it, has been gendered. So you can do work on your own to make sense of and ask yourself why that is, and I think you'll see progress pretty quickly in terms of your own experimentation.
Yeah.
There was a question.
Yeah, I wanted to address one to Ashleigh that I know because I was there that you went to a all-women multi-day LARP.
I did do that.
I played a trans woman there,
I did.
And I was curious.
And why haven't I talked about that before now? What was the rest of your question? I'm sorry.
If you had anything you wanted to say about that, that was relevant here.
Yeah, I do. Thank you for reminding me to talk about that. So I did play in a multi-day all-women LARP, completely organized and played by women. Where by women we mean basically just if you identify as a man, stay home. It's really the loosest possible definition here. And one major thing that I found playing that, being in that space, and just talking about the safety that Kim mentioned, is that I found safety in my voice, which is one of my greatest points of dysphoria. And despite voice training and all this stuff, I still kind of hate it, honestly. But in that space with those people, I stopped worrying, and it helped me really find my voice and what I wanted to sound like, because I could just stop caring so much, because I wasn't performing for men anymore. I would say no offense to the men in the room, but some, I guess. Just because it was just, everything was just easier. I didn't have to worry. And there were a lot of things where it was just like, oh, because I'm here and because we're in this explicitly women-only space, everyone here is going to treat me like a woman. No matter how hard I try, I don't have to wear makeup and cover my remaining facial hair. I will still be treated like a woman by everybody here, because it's the guarantee of the space upon entering it. Stuff like that. It was just really, really nice, really freeing. And now living in the real world, I almost perceive the difficulty of being in public more, or at least recognize it more, even if it doesn't affect me more, because I saw what it was like to not have to care about that stuff.
So that's actually an interesting question, because you're talking about things that are explicit consent and explicit boundaries and explicit expectations.
Yes.
So from a game design perspective, incorporating those into games is a way to make people feel safer.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's something to maybe think about when you're writing something. You've written a lot of games as well.
Yeah, I actually, but before that, I wanted to comment on the game also. Just briefly, I didn't go and play the game, but I had a lot of thoughts about it. I'm glad it exists, and I think it sounded like a really good experience. And it caused me to spend a lot of time thinking about gender stuff, because I felt like I could go to the game and say, "Hi, I'm a woman here to play the game." And no one did, but did I want to do that?
Right, totally.
And I guess I figured out the arc that I would like to play if I ever play that game, which would be sort of a departure send-off kind of arc. Like, what I realized was that I really wanted to have a sort of, I wanted to have a positive experience with women that was sort of like, thanks for the fun times, and I'm out, but we're still friends, sort of thing.
Yeah. So what's fascinating,
knowing, having played the game and knowing it, we're talking about Everton for anyone who has heard of it. That would go over really well there.
Katie, what's fascinating is I had the same analysis.
Really?
Yes. I sat there and I was like, is this game? I'm like, no, I wouldn't. Yes, no, that's about what I was thinking about it.
Like, whoa. Like, holy shit. I'm swearing on camera, I'm sorry.
We'll have to beat that out later. So I'm sorry. What
I was just going to ask, because I have done a little bit less game design than you, and I'm thinking more about like boundaries and consent, about safe spaces. How can we make more safety for gender exploration in LARPs, I guess? Yeah,
that's sort of like the question we keep kind of circling.
Yeah, we do. It's going round and round. But like you were talking about explicit rules, and I think there's a lot of value in that. Explicit statements, but also in world backgrounds, making things really explicitly open.
I think, I guess this is sort of another question more than an answer. But one thing that I've noticed, at least among the LARPers I know and my friends, is that I think a lot of AFAB people feel more comfortable than AMAB people exploring that in games. Like, for a variety of reasons, but if I show up to a game in a suit, it maybe some people will think it's strange, but people don't generally give me any problems with it. But a lot of my friends who are AMAB or who still identify as cis men say I would never go to a game in a dress for fear that someone would think I was making fun of women, or that I was that I was punching down or doing all these things. Yeah, or laugh at you. Yeah, or
beat you up or call you names or whatever. Like,
sure.
Yeah, toxic masculinity is a terrible, terrible drug. And I think a lot of that just has to do with like men in general being squished down in terms of who they can be and how they can present.
So I guess I would really like to come up with a solution that's also, hey, men I know you can explore too. It's safe here, you know. No.
I think that's something that's so interesting because this is something I've been wrestling with, like as a trans man. I don't want that anymore. Like I did that. I'm done. I have the power now.
I have that insecurity.
Yeah, and also it's like, but it's like that sense of like I have the power now, and as much as I want to spread the power around, I don't want to give that power back up. And that's a little scary for me. Of like, hey, like I've really fucking clawed my way. Really flopping.
I am the soft, and I don't care anymore. I'm just the recorder.
And it's bad and wrong, and like the fact that there is a power structure, but it's like the fact that it's like, oh wait, I have to put that back up is scary to me. To me personally, I'm not speaking about anybody else.
Sure.
What this little snippet tells me is that there should be a game written. You know, we were joking at Emerton about Himmerton, right? Like Himmerton for dudes. But more seriously, I feel like, you know, someone should write a game centered around getting men to explore gender stuff and creating a safe space where it's okay to do that. Because, yeah, Kit, sup?
Do we feel like this would be a space that would better be if it was all just men or AMAB people? Or would do we think that these people would feel more comfortable if it was a mixed gender crowd all exploring different genders?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Or
as I don't have a gender degree.
I ask as somebody that wants to design games specifically to force people to explore gender.
No, actually I have an answer.
Some of us may be doing that already.
Yeah.
I think my answer there is that it would be I think both is good. Yeah. Because I think there's definitely, you know, there's already games kind of happening that are like everyone's exploring gender regardless of, you know, their stock equipment, as it were. But I think there's also room specifically for like a game written for men. Maybe we could even say mostly cis men to really like kind of break out of their shell a little bit and see what's out there.
My question with that is who should write that game?
Yeah, I don't fucking know.
Yeah, because
Who writes this?
but
I don't know.
But it's also one of those things where like
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I am not someone who is AMAB. I'm non-binary, so I don't know that I'd be comfortable writing that game because I'd be worried about perceptions or something like that. But I would write that with co-writers, you know.
And like, I feel like as somebody assigned male, I feel like it could put a dent in it. Yeah. But I know myself, and my implicit bias, and the message would just be, it's okay, you can be a girl, and that's not right either. And like I'm quipping, but like actually, that's not the right answer either.
Well, I think it sounds like the solution is probably the same solution to a lot of games of let's have a large and diverse group of GMs come together.
Yeah,
game
maybe we should work together. I hate this. Yeah.
See, I think I would just implicitly go, it's okay, you can just gender bend any way you want.
Right.
Which is like, gender bending is like one of the extra, like, Avatar, the
I was just gonna make the same joke. It's one of the things waterbenders can do, right?
Yeah.
You seem like you have something you want to say. No, Laura.
No, I was just gonna say that tapping on other people makes a lot of noise.
Oh, sorry.
I'm a noisy person. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. That is what it is.
I mean, I'm just playing with my pen underneath the table.
You're lucky I don't have my fidget cube. It'd be click, 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 click the whole time because I'm nervous. How much time do we have left?
You have 13 minutes.
Wow.
So we have time for more questions, more banter, more conflicting access needs.
You want to tell encouraging anecdotes?
So I actually had a really good experience at Musica Universalis the other weekend, which was a one-shot 1930s game, low boffer combat, set in the Dust Bowl. end of the world is coming, angels and demons, because they did bring out all the angels and demons specifically as not having gender unless they chose to do genders, and the ones who chose to do genders mostly chose opposites from what they actually were in real life. So like Michael was specifically male, but everyone else was they, and they would yell at the PCs if they got it wrong. And there's nothing
awesome.
There is nothing quite as reaffirming as a giant angel yelling at you that you've messed up their pronouns.
I love it.
And like, it was a little thing, and you think it would be natural to say, hey, let's put like agender, non-binary people in game or power beings. It doesn't happen that much. It usually defaults to whatever gender the person is playing, and it was absolutely fabulous. It was also fabulous because they were angels who were jerky good guys, and there were devils who were really nice bad guys, and it wasn't just villainy and queer coding. So,
and that's, I think, to bounce off what you just said there at the end. That's, you know, as a designer, and this probably doesn't need to be said to this crowd, but it should still be said. You know, make sure you're not only queer coding your villains.
I'm just gonna demic you so you can stay still.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate. Me, so now I can tap.
Yeah, that was good.
No, I was
Thank you.
Yeah, that was it.
We're good.
Anyway, okay, yeah. Where was I? Right.
queer coding, don't do it just to villains.
Yeah. Basically, that's all I wanted to say. Is just like, you know, when you're designing, just check, make sure that's not a thing that happened, because that's bad.
Yeah, there was another game I was in where they made some of the backstory. There was someone who had married a god in backstory that we reenacted, and they were explicitly they. And the GMs did not realize it at the time, but one of the people they had pointed this story at was a friend of mine who is agender, but he's not very loud about it, still uses he pronouns. And the two of us were just like, wait a minute, after game, and we were so ridiculously touched by the fact they did this. And it was so reaffirming to actually know that they thought about this. And in both cases, the staff of these LARPs are, as far as I know, all cis. So they thought to include people. And
good job, cis people. You did it.
Yeah, and it was really sweet. You know, and I talked to a friend who's gay who's had a similar story about them including gay couples in the past and how much that meant to her. And so it's like, you see me. You see us. We're valid. We exist. We're real. You've made space for us. You didn't have to do that, and it's not your default method. You know, you could have easily overlooked it. No one would have said anything. And that was nice.
Thanks for sharing that. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's showing cultural shift, which is good.
Anyone else got some good anecdotes?
I feel like I've sort of anecdoted a lot.
So
far.
We're here. We're you know, if you want to keep going, that's fine. No pressure. That's something.
I recently finished up a 3-year campaign where I played a male character.
Yeah, awesome.
Thanks.
Fuck yeah for campaigns ending too.
And you look great.
Thank you. And I'd been very nervous about playing the character and playing the game because a lot of the people I didn't know very well, and I didn't know to be, you know, necessarily enlightened or what have you. And you know, sort of, I guess the term in Boffer LARP community is stick jocks, sort of like I'm here to fight, and you know, like that sort of. So I didn't really know how they'd take it. And at the end of the game, I was talking to some of them, and they just sort of cutely were like, "You made a really good guy." I was like, "That's really cute. Thank you, Stick Jocks."
Good job, Stick Jocks. You did it in your terrible Stick Jock way.
Yeah, you know, and I just felt like I felt like they didn't really know what was happening, but they were being accepting anyway. It was sort of very cute. Yeah.
Don't look at me. I don't have any anecdotes. I am cis.
Are you?
My shirt says it has to be true.
That's the truth.
I mean,
it's like the internet. If it says it, it's gotta be true.
You labeled yourself, and I have to respect that.
That's
It's
right.
true.
It was for the TSA, just so they.
Yeah, to get the TSA to leave me alone, I just give them money.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Pre-check.
Yeah, pre-check. I don't bribe them. It is basically a bribe.
Anything else? Do we know? Are there any like burning thoughts that you didn't?
So there's a couple of games that I've seen in the community that I'm in that are specifically with different genders or in the world. They're usually fantasy games. Pod Dancing springs to mind right away.
That sounds really good. Yeah.
Which has like 6 different genders trying to make gender triads in it.
Just 4. But,
4?
Yeah.
4?
Only 4.
Only 4
so
genders.
far. I think some of the characters were expanding on that by the end, but the premise was 4.
And
Only 4.
The designers made a point of not doing our traditional 2-bucket system, basically. And that was really liberating for a lot of people because also cis people put gender expectations upon themselves and limit themselves in that way. The toxic masculinity part, guys not being allowed to show emotion or be sweet or cry or hug each other or touch each other without it being sexual. That's all that bullshit. Pardon the language. Recording lady.
It's like the Matrix. Free your mind.
I'm not sure why we cast the camera person as this prude.
I think we're actually looking at the camera, not you.
Yeah.
At least I am. I'm apologizing to.
Sarah has to look at this. So.
We're sorry, Sarah. We're
Yeah.
not sorry.
Would any of you like to talk about any projects you're working on involving gender and LARP?
Actually, I love that.
Okay, fine.
You got 6 minutes. Can you plug the shit out of yourself?
Okay, fine. I'll talk about the LARP I'm writing. God.
Yeah, please.
So the game is tentatively titled Swap Meet. Yeah, and
How is
it's
meat spelled?
That's a good question. No, I've been thinking about that, and I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
The game is about it's a sci-fi game about a race of androids who are built somewhat in the image of humans, but they come with different kinds of chassis and equipment and stuff. But to these androids, the only thing that actually matters is what's going on up here in the cybernetic brain bits, and the body parts are kind of interchangeable. And so they have these swap meets where like cliques of these android folk get together and trade body parts around, exploring different modes of existence, different gender presentations, basically. And the core mechanic of the game is that each player is given a color, and that color is their starting gender loadout, for lack of a better term. And over the course of play, so each player is given a color for their character, and their costuming in the sort of high production value version, their costuming has to all be of that color and be removable with like a base layer underneath. So maybe you have, if your color is red, maybe you have like a red scarf around your neck and a red like t-shirt over like your basic blacks or whatever, and so on. And over the course of play, the players trade costuming to represent the characters trading body parts. So the characters explore their gender through literally switching pieces of themselves around and seeing what fits and what doesn't. The sort of lower production value version is strips of cloth that you just tie around your stuff, and then you just untie it and trade. And I just imagined, I had this image in my head pop a few months ago of like, a bunch of people LARPing and they're like trading clothes around and being able to look at them and see like, oh, that person's trying on orange gender, that's beautiful, look at them go. And the characters, I'm infusing into them different experiences that trans people I know, so mine and other folks, different experiences that people have lived. Like, for example, the character I'm basing off of my own experiences doesn't necessarily feel bad in where they are now, but has this potential for like intense euphoria if they find the things that fit for them. And other characters are dealing with like, internalized transphobia, stuff like that. So that's my plug.
Cool.
Shameless.
Thanks.
Yeah. swap meet. Coming later in 2018.
So, I mean, I'm not writing anything at the moment. I have a pet project that I've been working on and off for years that everyone's a dinosaur. It's called Roar Dinosaur, and you're a dinosaur. That's all. Dinosaurs don't care about gender.
Did you submit those a couple years to Golden Cobra?
No.
This sounds like a Golden Cobra
category.
Yeah, like dinosaurs don't care about gender. I'm positive about this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously.
Yeah,
I mean, everyone knows that.
Every single dinosaur, they can be feathered if they want and flamboyant. They can be scaly. It's all good, you know. They can be sleek or not. Dinosaurs just don't care, which is also, you know, tagline. But you know, other than that, I'm involved with Intercon, and I'm involved with doing stuff in that space. If I get my act together this year, we'll have another non-binary trans meetup. It'll just depend on the scheduling time. So
Can I just say I'm really excited about the gender buckets that Intercon introduced this last
Oh
year?
yeah, those are.
Wait, are there literal buckets?
Yes,
we used to have
I don't want to.
So actually, Nat is in our audience, and he's one of the people who worked on that. But
I don't want a bucket.
we used to have a sign-up bucket system that was very historical, going back because Intercon's been around for 30+ years. That was male and female characters, and you know, neutral characters, and GMs could determine how many there were when you signed up, and we no longer have to use the gender buckets at all. And we have different buckets. If you wanted to have everyone sign up as either a dinosaur or a possum, I don't know why it's those issues, but they could.
Possums are gay.
Possums are super gay, it's true.
Yeah, it makes sense. Or like, if you wanted to have 32 AI slots, you can have 32 AI slots, or horde and not horde, or Vikings and pirates.
And from a player perspective, it certainly helped me a lot to not have to type my gender into the website at the beginning, and then have that follow over to every game, unless I go back and redo it between. This way, I don't have to actually start with a gender. I can just say, for this game, I'm going to play this. For this game, I'm going to play this.
I don't want to interrupt our lovely panelists. I have been given explicit instructions not to let this run long.
All right.
And we have in particular. So I want you to be able to plug anything you're working on.
Yeah, definitely.
Are you working on anything, Katie?
I'm working on a game based on Hatful Boyfriend. I don't know.
Right, you are.
Why did you make this up like an hour ago?
Why isn't the panel just about this?
Yeah, no, that'd be better.
That's why I waited till a minute in, because I don't want to talk about it that much.
Okay.
Fair.
It's still early stages, but I bid it to a convention in September, so hopefully it'll actually be written by then.
Well, best of luck.
Thank you.
So, round of applause for all our lovely panelists.